Hello and welcome. I'm Kirsty Gwynn. I'm the founder of Positive EQ, and today we are talking what your anxiety is trying to tell you, and specifically 4 explanations that nobody's talking about. So I hope that you'll learn something really new today about how to understand your anxiety better. So one of the hardest things about feeling a difficult emotion like anxiety is not knowing why you feel that way. Of course, when something doesn't make sense, we feel really helpless to change it. And so if you're feeling anxious about something already, on top of that, feeling helpless to change your anxiety is then you're anxious about that on top of being anxious. And it's just a really horrible spiral, which I know is familiar to many of us. So what I hope to empower you with today is a way to understand exactly why your brain is setting off kind of a siren of anxiety, which, anxiety at its heart is telling us that maybe something bad's going to happen or we're going to get hurt in some way. All emotions are messages from the mind. Now, it feels pretty obvious, right, that anxiety is a sense that something bad's going to happen or we're going to get hurt. And so in today's live, I really want to dive much deeper than that. Right? Because just acknowledging that, I'm scared something bad's going to happen, doesn't really empower us to be able to do anything about it. And so I'm going to be sharing with you 4 reasons why your mind has actually decided that you might get hurt or that something bad might happen. So just as a disclaimer, the mind is not always accurate, it's not always rational, and it's certainly not always right. So as I go through these 4 reasons, if you kind of think, I don't think that's true, I want you to remember that we can objectively know something and feel completely different. So I'm sure you've been in a situation before where you think, I have nothing to be afraid of here, but you still feel scared, right? You still feel afraid. And that's because the kind of fear center in our brain, it's not a rational center, it's an emotional center. And so even if we tell it that, it doesn't make sense or we're being ridiculous or anything like that, that's not going to make that fear go away, because emotions, they work completely differently. They're actually a different part of your brain. And the assessment that they're making is not always an accurate assessment. So as we go forward and I share these 4 kind of things with you, these 4 explanations with you, I want you to keep an open mind. And as you hear them, not to say, do I think that's true, but to actually ask yourself, does that feel true emotionally, right? So regardless of whether the mind is being rational or not in that specific situation, we need to understand what it is trying to tell us. When you understand what message it's trying to send, you are actually so empowered, because you are then able to receive that message and to say, okay, maybe there's a need that needs to be fulfilled. And now that you know what that need is, you can see if there's a way that you can fulfill it. And if you can, that's going to dramatically reduce your anxiety. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing that your mind is telling you when you feel anxious is, I don't feel capable of making this work out. I don't feel capable of making this work out. So in any situation that we encounter, there is always what we call a skill to challenge ratio. And so if you imagine that you go into a certain situation and you bring a certain amount of skill to that situation, and the situation offers you a certain amount of challenge relative to your skill, right? And so if, for example, the challenge level is much lower than your skill level, you're going to be bored or you're going to be relaxed, right? You're going to be bored or you're going to be relaxed. If they are evenly matched and you're feeling kind of that perfect amount of challenge, that's often a very invigorating space for most of us, right? We never, for many of us, not getting stagnant and being challenged is really important. And that's the challenge level we want. We want to feel like maybe the challenge level is slightly above our skill level, even just so it's stretching us, but not too much, and also that we're not bored. But now, it makes sense, right, that when the challenge level far exceeds our perceived skill level, we're going to feel overwhelmed or we're going to feel anxious. Now, as I said, mentally, objectively, you might be like, no, I am capable. But I want you to ask yourself, do you feel 100% capable in that situation? Because if you are experiencing any self-doubt, if you're doubting your abilities at all, that's going to cause anxiety. And so one of the explanations when you feel anxious to come back to is say, okay, maybe my mind doesn't feel capable in this situation, right? The second thing that causes your mind to set off anxiety is not feeling in control of whether you get hurt or not. So let me put it out there that the mind loves to be in control, right? It loves consistency. It loves to know if I do A, B is going to happen consistently, and I can rely on that. It hates to be out of control. It's a really anxious space to not know whether the good outcome is going to happen or not. So consider the fact that a lot of anxiety, in fact, most anxiety, comes from situations where we are not in control. So social anxiety happens because we aren't in control of how people react to us, how they treat us, what they think of us, whether they judge us or not, whether they approve of us or not. And so social anxiety is very natural because kind of to your mind, it's like, but I'm doing everything I can and there's still a negative outcome. If you've developed anxiety in a situation where, for example, like driving is another common type of anxiety, and often it occurs after you've had an accident that had nothing to do with you, right? You didn't cause the accident, you weren't accountable for it, you weren't to blame for it. And what happens there in your brain is that your brain's saying, but I did all the necessary steps and there was still a negative outcome. And it's going to conclude that you're not in control of whether you're safe in that space, whether you get hurt in that space or you don't, whether you get judged, whether people disapprove of you, whether you fail or you succeed. And so one of the things to come back to if you're feeling anxious is to say, okay, do I feel in control of whether I get hurt or not? All right, let's move on to the third thing. And the third thing your mind might be telling you is I'm lacking clarity. And what I mean by this is that let's say you have a big goal for your life, right? So let's say you've started a business and you perceive where you want your business to be. So in your mind, you have this kind of beautiful vision of how you would like things to be. And that is quite different from where you currently are. Now that vision could be something that can make you really excited, but if your mind perceives that it doesn't know how to get there, that the path is unclear, you're going to feel anxious because what you've shown it is kind of, this is the end point, but there's no clarity of how to close that gap. The same thing, another space that people often develop anxiety in is about relationships. If it is a desire for you that you want to get married and have a family, but you're currently single, it can cause a lot of anxiety because if you don't feel like you know exactly what to do to bring that about, which we often don't, we're going to perceive this big gap. Your mind looks at that big gap and says, I don't know how to close that, right? And so it's unclear about the steps that you need to take. It's not sure of exactly how to close that gap and what the path is. So the question to kind of come back to with that, if you're feeling anxious, is to also say, if you're feeling anxious about a goal bringing about a big outcome, say, is the path clear? Am I completely clear about how to close this gap and how to get there? And if you're not, that makes sense that is one of the reasons that you could be feeling anxious or overwhelmed. Okay, so the final thing, and this kind of brings everything together, is that your brain doesn't feel hopeful. And so the final and fourth thing that it might be telling you is, I'm not hopeful, as in, I'm not certain that this is going to work out. Fear and hope are opposites. If you think about it, the more certain you are that something good is going to happen, the less afraid you're going to feel. And the less certain you are, the less hopeful, the more afraid you're going to feel, because you're going to think, well, what if it doesn't happen, or what if something bad happens, right? And so this kind of why I say it ties together the last three points that I mentioned is because if your mind looks at a situation and it says, I feel like there's too much challenge here and I am not capable, and yes, I'm not capable of bringing about a good outcome. I'm also not in control of whether I get hurt or not. And I am unclear of how to do this, of how to achieve a positive outcome, of what steps I need to take. That is all going to affect your ability to feel certain, to feel hopeful that you are going to get the outcome that you want. So the question to ask there is just, do I feel hopeful? How certain am I that what I want is going to happen? All right, so an exercise that you can do, and if you have a pen and paper with you, you can do it now, and you can also do it after the video, is to just think of a situation where you experience anxiety. And let's go through the 4 questions that we've 4 questions that relate to the 4 points that we've discussed today. So the first question would be, do I feel capable of making things turn out the way that I want them to? The second question would be, am I completely in control of whether I get hurt or not? The third question, do I clearly know and understand what steps I need to take to make that positive outcome more likely? Right? I just want to clarify that when I say positive outcome, sometimes, for example, the driving example that I used, the positive outcome is just getting there safely. Right? So it's not necessarily some kind of big dream goal or anything. Sometimes it's just not getting hurt. The positive outcome is kind of the lack of negative outcome. Understand what I mean? So the 4th question is just, what am I hoping for? And I really love that question because, as I said, hope is the opposite of fear. It's the antidote to anxiety. And when you ask, what am I hoping for, it can be really thrilling to kind of think about, okay, what's the best case scenario here, right? So now that you understand your anxiety better, what is the next step? Well, in 2 weeks' time, I'm offering a free online masterclass called the 4-Step Scientific Framework to End Negative Thinking and Overcome Anxiety. And I've included a link in the description of this video if you'd like to join. If you do sign up in the space of time leading up to that, I'm going to be sharing with you about anxiety and helping you to understand it better over email. And so some of the topics that we're going to be going into, we're really going to be doing a deep dive into anxiety. And some of the things we're going to be looking at are how much movement we really have when it comes to fear and anxiety. So how much can we actually reduce our fear, right? We're going to be looking at the reason why your brain causes you to think the worst or why it jumps to the worst conclusion first. And we're also going to be looking at why trying to manage your thoughts as kind of a way to manage anxiety is actually one of the hardest and most time-consuming ways to try and overcome anxiety, and what you can do instead that works much more quickly and is much more effective. And I guarantee that this is not something you've ever heard before. The positive EQ method is brand new. And positive psychology, which everything that I do is based completely on evidence. In positive psychology, I'm a big nerd about that. I don't recommend anything that is not scientifically tested because there are therapies that have actually been shown to cause worse outcomes, and there are things that obviously have great outcomes. And I like to be really sure that what I'm doing is something that works, that can be trusted reliably, right? And that you are safe doing. And that is only going to bring you closer to where you want to be and help you to feel calmer and happier. And so, yeah, I really, really hope to see you in that masterclass. And if you have any friends who you think could benefit from seeing this video, please share it with them and tell them about the masterclass. And from me, I wish you a life of calm and contentment, and that you may live with courage. And I hope to see you in the masterclass and upcoming series. And I'm going to be doing a bunch more videos on anxiety too. Thank you.